engage them in the process, because there's no question, you're right, there's a problem there. You sit out Bismarck, and that world and that city is so engaged in what's going on. You sit there as a Fargo legislator, and you're like an alien there. There's no communication going either way. And I'm not going to fault one side or the other, but there's no question. We go out there, and it's like you even read the media back here, like there's really not much going on. And we're making some darn important situations in the future of this community. And this might be a good avenue to start some of that. But I think it needs to be concerted effort, one way or the other. But to start some way to engage them. And it might be slow. And I think we all know, because there's a lot of elected officials in there, we're not always going to agree with the others come up with. But it's important that we communicate and talk. And it's really important to get this legislature more engaged. I mean, we are the largest metro area in this state. We are going to add most likely 2 districts in Cass County. No matter what, this could end up stay at 47, potentially 49 districts. They don't know yet. But no matter how you shake it out, Cass County is going to add 2 districts, it looks like. And that makes it important. But so I think somewhere there should be added to this to take the Fargo. You're not the Cass County, because you'd have to narrow it to Fargo at this process. But that's still quite a few legislators, and make a concerted effort to engage them. And let it, because really there's only one. I mean, Tom, because of the flood, and Fisher, is quite involved on the water board. But I think you might be surprised if somebody gets it going and do improve the communication level.
It's a good comment, and I don't think we had a conversation with anyone either that didn't include NDSU or your colleges and universities and how important they are to the economy, to everything. So it's clear that in some places the collaboration in the community and the conversation is as strong as we've ever seen it, and it's clear that in a few other key places it's not happening on the level that it needs to. And so those are things that are going to bubble out of this process. How exactly we handle them is probably more up to this group than to our team. So if there are things that you see you think are really important, we're happy to help it however we can, but don't feel like you can't take action on something either.
One of the things, we probably should have on this, whether it's a student body president, NDSU, or Rick, some of your even student council, or some representatives from the high schools. I don't think an 18-year-old is too young to be at this table. And they're going to be the future, whether they live here or not. They've been here for 18 years, and they really know what's going on, a lot more so than some of us in certain areas of the town. And they probably should be at this table, 2 or 3 people, even if they just, quasi or sit in. And I think it's good to add some youth.
I saw a lot of nodding heads. It seemed like we could make that happen, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to shift us slightly here down to the community goals session, and we may take just 5 to 10 minutes for each of the facilitators from each of these tables to tell you what the 3 top goals from their table were. Some of you heard this last night, but I think it would be good just to hear it anew and in a clear voice, because we started last night moving from that high-level vision down to a little bit more specificity. And I might also add, we're going to continue to do this to get more and more specific. Every time we start a community process and have a table like this, there's half of the group that wants to only talk about the high-level vision and half the group that only wants to talk about the specific implementation items. So for those of you that really want to talk about specificity, hold on. We're going to get there eventually. So we're actually, just because I didn't get a chance to talk to Eric ahead of time, I'm not going to start with Eric, and we're going to end with Eric. So we're going to start with, actually, is Dan here? No. Why don't we start with transportation and infrastructure? Cindy, why don't you help us there?
All right. The group that did that participated.
Cindy, I think they're recording this. Do you want to go up to the lectern or
Or sit down right here.
All right. There was a group that talked about transportation and infrastructure, and their 3 goals included providing for a higher level of diversity in transportation, and by that they meant walking, biking, bus, perhaps in the future some other form of mass transportation like light rail. And along with that, they wanted to emphasize an attitude and actions of respect between different modes of transportation. They wanted a higher level of coordination between the different modes of transportation, and they wanted a higher level of improved system continuity, and particularly with modes such as transit and bicycle transportation.
Thank you, Cindy. Zach, do you want to tell us about economic development?
Sure. We talked a lot about the dynamic of people, choosing a place to live and then finding a job versus going where the jobs are. And it goes both ways. And Fargo is really strong with the jobs. And there's an opportunity to make sure it's a good fit for people because they feel welcomed in the community. And it's a good fit because there's economic opportunities. And it's a good fit because of quality of life. So those are the three big categories we talked about.
Thank you, Zach. Jim, do you want to talk about land use and urban design?
Yeah, my group that I had is pretty interesting because it was really made up of a diverse set of young people. So the focus obviously was from their perspective, and they talked a lot about a need for better mass transportation and focusing on the urban core. And so the three top issues that ultimately came out of that discussion was they felt it's important to establish an urban growth boundary so we're not spreading out too far. They also want to look at ways to increase overall density once you're on that inside of that boundary. And then everything that we do have should be high quality and mixed use. They really were focusing on this mixed use. They talked a lot about if we're going to have, like the downtown core, they love that, but they thought, can we emulate that so we'd have these neighborhood nodes where you'd have your commercial and your residential all mixed together, and then looking at ways to connect those. So those three things: urban growth boundary, infill, high quality infill, mixed use, and then increasing density.
Thank you, Jim. Bob, do you want to talk about energy?
The conversation around energy was pretty interesting last night, and if I could collect all of those things into an idea, it really boiled down to, in that group's mind, of increasing human health and productivity, efficiency, and performance in the community while reducing the operating costs. To get to the specific goals, the first was to do more about educating the community about the opportunities of energy efficiency, starting with the fact that it improves human health and productivity and comfort by so doing in your home or in your businesses, and by educating and maybe providing a few incentives, you could ramp up and expect to achieve something on the order of 30 to 50% efficiency throughout the community, and that the city should lead this by example. And if you look at all the strategies, the highest return on investment a business or a city can achieve is by investing in energy efficiency. So you can fund this, you can get a quick payback, and you can start leading the rest of the community. We're finding in other communities that, particularly with people with moderate incomes, find they have much more capacity to pay their mortgage if they retrofit their home in terms of insulation, envelope issues, basically just making the house, improving the performance of the house. And then on top of that, you can add technology. So, for example, particularly with the students, we find in other communities and on campuses that if we put in some kind of what we call dashboard, which is real-time reporting on how they're doing, you get competition between residence halls and between sectors. And it really, the behavior over and above all the other improvements drives the consumption way down. The second issue was once that had been done, the second investment would be to invest more in renewable energy sources. And a number were identified, starting with using ground-coupled systems, meaning you have a very high water table here, no surprise. And so that's the perfect environment to use ground-coupled systems, or some call it geothermal, but we're not talking about drilling down in the earth and getting to magma. We're talking about using the 55-degree temperature that's about 10 feet below the surface. So starting with that, but then using all the other resources, wind, solar. There was a lot of interest in cellulosic ethanol, doing research and developing the best conversion techniques, and maybe creating the conversion plant here and sort of claiming a lead in technology because you're an agri-based region. And so you can use agricultural waste to produce the energy. The third area was something that's come up several times, and that's public transportation. It first came up about being able to save, back to Stephen's slide about transportation and the cost of it. It was real clear, particularly with the young people. A number of college students had come here without a car, and they kind of survived their first year when they were pretty much on campus. But once they knew the community and wanted to start moving around, they found that they just didn't work on a bus. It took maybe an hour and 50 minutes to 2 hours and a half to get from A to B. And in a college student's life, that's not viable. And so they had to buy a car. And that's a big expense for them. And the same would apply, even though we haven't heard it articulated, with people in the lower, more challenging income levels. So improving the public transportation system will dramatically increase access and the viability of the families in the community, and at the same time dramatically reduce energy and give you air benefits and so on. And so those were the three. My group actually felt committed to a fourth, and so I'll share it. And it was about the street lights. So there was a conversation earlier about this, but a young man in my group had done a lot of research on this, and he thought every other street light should be eliminated. That there is A, too much light, and B, way too much light pollution. And he had some specific examples that were pretty interesting. And what he didn't know, but what is possible, is just changing luminaires would give you much more control, much more efficiency, reduce energy consumption dramatically, and more importantly for you, the city, it would reduce the cost because they last at least 10 times as long, if not 20. And so you get, again, multiple benefits by some minor adjustments like that. And I think that group, it was a great group, and they did a terrific job. There's much more to do, but they'd be up for it.
What is a luminaire?
Oh, that's the light source itself, changing the lamp instead of the whole fixture.
Yesterday afternoon, some of us were at it's the North Dakota NICE, but it's about energy efficiency, and so the Grand Forks Green Council came down, and then we had presentations over at the library. But what comes out, and all of what you speak about, is one of the things is people at this table don't really, we can leap, again, we have things in place, like we've replaced 180 streetlights downtown. I'm not being defensive here. I guess my point is that there's not enough information from where we're at now. Again, I think that in the PowerPoint I put together, what I'd maybe suggest is working with Bruce Grubb and then putting the stuff that I've put together to show where we're at now for the energy efficiency upgrades. Part of that is the new LED lights downtown. They take a minute to switch them out. It was 180 lights, and you can direct the light so you're not shining it up into the trees. So those are things that are already underway, but if the public sees that, they'll say, yeah, we want more